said the greatest threat to national security was climate change. Do you still believe that?
Absolutely. In fact, climate change is directly related to the growth of terrorism.
Said the greatest threat to national security was climate change. Do you still believe that?
Absolutely. In fact, climate change is directly related to the growth of terrorism. And if we do not get our act together and listen to what the scientists say, you're going to see countries all over the world. This is what the CIA says. They're going to be struggling over limited amounts of water, limited amounts of land to grow their crops, and you're going to see all kinds of international conflict.
President Obama is on his way to Paris today for a climate change summit, and this week he linked that to the war on terror. Take a look.
What a powerful rebuke to the terrorists it will be when the world stands as one and shows that we will not be deterred from building a better future for our children.
Your reaction to the summit and to the contention by some in the Obama administration that climate change is, if not the biggest, certainly the most immediate threat to our national security?
Well, that's delusional. It is delusional for President Obama and Hillary Clinton and anyone else to say that climate change is our near-term most severe security threat. It is ISIS, period, followed closely by Iran and perhaps Russia. President Obama continues to think that somehow our behavior causes terrorism. So he says the climate change summit is a powerful rebuke. No, it's not. The terrorists don't care that we're gathering in Paris other than it provides a target. Just as he said, well, Republicans are giving terrorists a recruiting tool and we don't think Syrian refugees should be allowed to enter this country if we cannot properly vet them. President Obama is delusional about this. He's delusional about the threat, which apparently is why he won't do anything about it.
This is what we've reaped by voting Democrat, by electing people who desire to be so connected with the Islamic extremists and use them as tools to promote their next agenda to get the next guy in power. We have reaped a whirlwind of destruction upon America by electing a president whose ties with Hamas, who has ties with Hezbollah, who's met with Hezbollah and all the radical extremists who said nothing's wrong with them, they're my friends. Bill Ayers, President Obama's mentor. We've reaped a whirlwind of destruction, desolation. This is what happened in 2001, September, when Bush got reelected. What happened? Saudi Arabia sent over their terrorists. There are about a number of them who came over here, and they flew planes into the World Trade Center. Some of you were too young to understand what went on, but Saudi Arabia sent the terrorists over. Once Bush said that we no longer want to be dependent on foreign oil, a little bit later after that, a few months later, maybe 6 months later, they sent the terrorists over here and blew up our World Trade Center because they needed us to be dependent on that foreign oil, that Saudi Arabian oil. That which we called evil yesterday is still evil today. On January the 29th, 2010, Al Jazeera reported bin Laden using Democrat talking points about global warming and climate change. It is amazing that Democrats are willing to partner with terrorists who blew up our World Trade Centers just to push a socialist agenda on America. Not only do Democrats use these terrorists to get in power and make government bigger, but they even use them to spit their talking points and their propaganda to get us away from using our own oil and being dependent not only on Saudi Arabia's oil, but now we're dependent upon mechanisms that don't produce enough energy to run our tanks or planes, like solar power, wind power, and things. I'm sure Russia's happy about that. The entire Russian economy is based on oil. The communists and KGB operatives that run the Democrat Party don't want America to be dependent on our own oil, but on foreign oil so they can create instability in the Middle East and destabilize our economy. In this damning report, we see Hillary Clinton meeting with members of Al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria before the attack on our embassy, where our government gave high-power rifles to members of Al-Qaeda in order to topple Gaddafi and bring instability throughout the Middle East and the rise of ISIS. In a day when we see terrorism arising in the Middle East and within America, why in the world would you listen to any news anchor or celebrity that would want Hillary Clinton to be president of the United States? The reason why socialist progressives, Democrats, and liberals refuse to call Islamic extremism terrorism is because the Democrat is a terrorist themselves.
Outrage today following the release of a violent climate change video. The environmental group that produced it thought it would be funny. After only a few hours on the internet, it had to take the thing down because of the massive backlash over the horrific content. Now, a warning to our viewers. What you are about to see is extremely graphic. Please, this will be disturbing to some of you.
Right, kids, just before you go, there's a brilliant idea in the air that I'd like to run by you. Now, it's called 10-10. The idea is everyone starts cutting their carbon emissions by 10%, thus keeping the planet safe for everyone, eventually.
We're thinking of using our car less. I'm going to cycle to school.
That's fantastic, Jemima. Now, no pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic! And those not? Philip and Tracy. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh, just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now everybody, please remember to read chapters 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation. Except for Philip and Tracy, of course.
Today, fascists and terrorists literally run the Democrat Party and members of the science community to censor all opposing views.
That's what they thought would make you laugh. We stopped the video at that point because what happens next is even more horrifying than what you just saw.
But I think that you ought to see for yourself just how terrorist-minded Democrat socialist progressives are about their man-made global warming / climate change message of fear and terror.
Right, just want to check on that 10-10 thing. Had some brilliant ideas from lots of you how the firm can cut down emissions by 10%. Just quick show of hands, everyone who wants to get involved. Great, that's nearly everybody. And yeah, just for the record, no pressure. Those who aren't quite convinced about it yet. Cool, it's no problem. Your choice. Okay, so those of you planning something here or at home should probably get working on it. Oh, gorgeous. Those of you who aren't, excellent. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Well, hello everyone. It's great to be back here at Spurs. So many happy memories for me. Anyway, tell me something. What is this 10-10 thing the club is doing?
Well, it means that we're trying to cut our carbon emissions by 10% this year, and Tottenham Hotspur Football Club was the first to sign up.
We've changed the floodlights at White Hart Lane, so low energy. Lots of our fans are coming to matches on buses, trains, bikes and stuff, rather than coming by car.
I see. Whatever, I wouldn't do it. It seems like distraction from football to me.
That's just fine, David. You don't have to join in, just ignore it. No pressure. Right, lads, let's do some penalties.
10-10. Hundreds of thousands of people, schools, businesses, hospitals, movie stars, knitting circles, scout troops, presidents and governments, all tackling climate change in more than 40 countries. Care to join us? No pressure.
Was that okay?
Sounded great to me. Thanks,
okay.
Gillian.
Happy to help.
So what are you thinking of doing for 10-10 yourself?
What, are you kidding me? I thought that by doing this voiceover, that was my contribution.
Right. No, absolutely. No pressure.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Jesus.
Mark Moreno is executive editor and chief correspondent for ClimateDepot.com, which is a group of global warming skeptics. We tried to get the folks behind this ad, and shockingly, they didn't want to come on to defend it.
Both Bill Nye the Science Guy and Neil deGrasse Tyson receives too much money from millionaires and billionaires. They have no facts. Instead of debating scientists within the field of climatology and earth science, they resort to name-calling and their deteriorating reputations.
In fact, Mark, thank you so much for being here. They've come out, they pulled this, and I want to show our viewers their explanation. This is their apology. Quote, "Sorry, we wanted to find a way to bring this critical issue back into the headlines whilst making people laugh, and many people found the resulting film extremely funny. But unfortunately, some didn't. And we sincerely apologize to anybody we have offended. Oh well, we live and learn." I'm telling you, Mark, you show little children getting blown up because they don't want to support the folks who are actively involved in the global warming issue, and they thought it would be funny. Is this how they're now making their point?
This is sadly what they've been reduced to. This is a desperate group, and I mean the global warming fear promoters are in desperation right now. President Obama has failed them, the U.S. Senate has failed them, the United Nations is failing them, the public is failing them. They needed to do something to get attention. So their idea to get attention was to blow up school children in as gory and disgusting a manner as possible, and it has spectacularly backfired, but many are still defending it as just satire and humor. The problem, Megan, is this expresses a very deep sentiment in their movement of wanting to get rid of and silence global warming skeptics. I mean, we had Al Gore in 1992 declare the debate over and lobby Ted Koppel to keep skeptics off TV. We had Grist magazine calling for Nuremberg-style trials for global warming skeptics. So there's been an actual intellectual strain here to silence skeptics, including Tom Friedman, who lauded China's environmental policies because one-party rule could work to the advantage and get needed things done without those meddling skeptics.
Well,
so
but you know,
it's expressing a real concern.
Satire is one thing, right? But
yes,
blowing up little children in very graphic form and showing it for all the world to see, and the sound effects that go along with it, really shocking stuff here. And it goes on. I mean, this video goes on for several minutes as they do this to more people who express any sort of skepticism about global warming. And my question to you is, in this day and age of extremists on both sides, on the far right and the far left, who unfortunately sometimes do resort to violence to make their cause, could this be perceived as somebody who doesn't quite have all the irons in the fire, as a rallying cry, as an idea?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, if you look at recently the Discovery gunman here in Washington, D.C. I mean, he was on the news with NBC ranting about the lack of global warming coverage. He wanted to kill people. There's a lot of crazies out there who will use this to further get them, jazzed up about harming people. So it's very frightening stuff. But the main thing is, intellectually, the global warming fear promoters have used intimidation. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said skeptics were akin to traitors and should be tried for treason. UN officials have said it's criminally negligent to not believe in man-made global warming. It's morally irresponsible. That rhetoric means things, and it may cause people to act.
Well, in this group, this 1010 campaign that's behind this, they hired this guy Richard Curtis, who, by the way, wrote Four Weddings and a Funeral and Notting Hill. He's very well liked over in Great Britain. To write this thing, he wrote it. And in case you were an X-Files fan, it stars Gillian Anderson at the end. She's happy to provide her voice for the voiceover. She's loving taking part in this ad showing the blowing up of little children. She's welcome to come on the program and defend that action. But nonetheless, they put this out there, and according to some reports, Mark, they use government funded, they use taxpayer money in Great Britain to fund it? Is that the case?
Yes, the government has contributed to this organization. Also, major corporate sponsors have been behind this. Major environmental groups have supported this.
And they use the propaganda and the networks of terror to destroy America's economic freedom and to control every aspect of our lives through a socialism and communist system within America. While we as Americans should be focused on national security and energy independence, the dumb Democrats has Americas more racially divided and still focused on the hoax of man-made global warming, so that America's energy depend on communist Russia and China, and made defenseless. So listen up, global warming climate change extremists. If you have to change the terms of reference in the middle of the debate, there's something real wrong with your argument. Democrat leaders and their so-called educated, arrogant, snooty experts who we still see on MSNBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, and NBC still pushing the fake research idea of man-made global warming in order to scare and terrorize Americans into surrendering their economic and energy sovereignty over to a bunch of socialist billionaires and millionaires who set the agenda of the United Nations. While Democrat presidents promote energy policies that only benefit communist Russia and China economically, we're all focused now on the fantasy world of thinking that it's normal for us to use biofuels that burns up faster, causes more to produce, and is a fuel that's derived by human food sources, such as corn, soybean, among others. You see, Russia doesn't care if we're producing biofuels that are based on food sources that cause our costs to go up and our food prices to rise. They don't care that we produce oil based on grains and food sources. Russia doesn't care if we have economic policies that don't make sense, that weaken our own dollar. While our Democrat president had Americans sleeping, being distracted by fighting terrorists that Obama himself was funding, and being distracted by phony protests of people in America who don't want us to mine for our own oil that we have in our own country, Russia and Vladimir Putin spent their time annexing and attacking one of our own allies, Ukraine, a democratic country that we've had relationships since the days of Reagan. Ukraine became free from communist oppression as a result of Ronald Reagan's leadership and his message of American exceptionalism. Reagan also promoted capitalism over communism, as well as economic opportunity and limited government. Russia's propaganda within the Democrat Party has convinced and misled Democrat leaders to forsake America's own massive oil and natural gas deposits. Meanwhile, Russia took over the oil-rich territories of Ukraine called Crimea, and Barack Obama, our Democrat president, said and did nothing significant to stop it. Communist China is the biggest offender of pollution in the world, and yet you don't ever hear those socialists in our country, those socialist Democrats, ever complaining about China or their human rights violations because they are subservient to China. And the liberal Democrat takes orders from socialist Russia as well. Yes, the hypocritical environmentalist has these protests, massive protests about the environment, yet they use iPhones that were created in China, produced by the slave labor of children, mining for toxic rare earth metals. Right after their protests, the parks are full of trash and filth and feces, and their Occupy Wall Streets, people are left with rat-infested squalor because the environmentalists are a bunch of hypocrites. And they are the paid slaves of union bosses who got the media coverage to create the illusion publicly that they are a multitude of concerned citizens. But what you average American need to know is that those people who you see protesting, for example, in immigration, where they demand that our borders stay open and where people can run to and fro from one border to the next border without showing any proof that they are an American citizen or are supposed to be in this country through green cards or employment visas. All those people are mere tools of the socialist progressives, whose ultimate goal is to destroy our national security. Just ask yourself the simple question: if a country has no borders, is it really a country at all? No, it isn't. Russia doesn't care that we have a self-destructive national security program that allows our borders to be open to terrorism and the Ebola virus. Russia has a vested interest in the destabilization of America. Russia does not care if we use biofuels that burn up all of our crops. Those people we see protesting on the news are high-paid unionistas, people who are paid by high-paid unions, and they receive money from government public sector unions. And these people only are there to create the public illusion of consensus, to create the illusion that they are a majority of concerned citizens, but they're really high-paid professional protesters who are only ultimately there to push Russia's interest within American borders. Whenever you hear a Democrat or even a rhino Republican in name only campaign for president saying we want to be the green energy superpower of the world, what these puppet politicians are really saying to the Russian establishment and the socialist progressive billionaires and millionaires is that I'm for sale. I'm willing to sell out my country and be a good little puppet for you socialists. If you help me fulfill my political aspirations in being president or governor or senator, I'm willing to be a good little puppet for you. I'm willing to be your puppet, and if you donate to me, I'll be a puppet for the Soviet Union, for the KGB, for Communist China. Just invest in me, your good little puppet candidate. And that's why you see no difference between voting Republican and Democrat sometimes. The question you've got to ask yourselves is, Is this candidate a socialist progressive? If they are, then they are a spineless, compromising, good-for-nothing puppet of socialist billionaires and international millionaires who have a vested interest in the spread of communism and socialism around the world. Remember, the city in the region with the most per capita billionaires and millionaires is Moscow, Russia. Socialist progressives, such as Zbigniew Brzezinski and Barack Obama, are nothing more than high-level Russian assets.
After my election, I have more flexibility. I understand. I transmit this information to Vladimir and
who are using their ties with Islamic extremist groups to destabilize the Middle East, so that Russia would be in a better position to take over all the Arab oil fields in Saudi Arabia and other oil-rich countries in the Middle East. Inevitably, that will lead to the collapse of the US dollar as the world's exchange currency. This ultimately allows Russia to set the cost of oil for all nations around the world. And if we keep voting Democrat, America will never be an oil and energy independent nation. Remember, it was President Reagan's strategy to drive down the price of oil to $11 a barrel that eventually bankrupted the Soviet Union and gave Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev no choice but to sign a series of agreements that recognized the decline of the Soviet Union. During the 2012 election period, there were over 24 liquid natural gas projects tied up in Obama's federal bureaucracy. Now, a presidential executive order could have liberated them and sent a clear message that the United States is prepared to replace Russia as the natural gas supplier of last resort. Now, this would have clearly sent a signal to the Europeans that in the next few years that they would have had an alternative to being blackmailed by Vladimir Putin. But again, when Americans vote Democrat, the Democrat Socialist Progressive is more interested in what's in the best interest for Russia than what's in the best interest for America and American citizens. Many of you were too young or were being brainwashed in high school or college and universities about this information that it didn't exist. But the truth is it did, but your media, your liberal media, censored it from you. And so did your teachers. Warning, what you're about to witness is evidence and information that has been blocked and censored from the internet.
Wendell, thank you. Well, let's get some thoughts now from senior political analyst Britt Hume on the scandal some are calling ClimateGate. Good evening, Britt.
Hi, Brett. As you heard in Wendell Golder's report, a large collection of emails exchanged among weather researchers at the University of East Anglia in England have gotten out and caused a scandal. The reason that university's climate research unit matters is that it has been heavily relied upon by the UN in reaching its alarmist conclusions about the threat of global warming. The reason it's a scandal is that the emails vividly portray leading scientists there scheming to suppress or discredit data and analysis contrary to their dire predictions. The whole idea that the Earth is warming dangerously and that man, by burning carbon fuels, is the cause, rests on computerized projections of future temperatures based on vast amounts of previously observed climate data. But there's a huge problem. There's been no apparent increase in global temperatures over the past 11 years, and the computerized climate models fail to predict this, and the global warming alarmists can't explain it. The obvious conclusion would be that there's something wrong with the computer models. Now it has come out that the original raw data used to create these models has been destroyed or otherwise disposed of. The response of the alarmists to these revelations has been that the emails were taken out of context and that the destruction of all that raw data was done for space reasons. There's a one-word answer to all of that. Please.
Britt, do you think that these revelations have the potential to slow or even stop the push for action on climate change?
Well, the momentum for that was already declining because global warming, climate change has been dropping lower and lower in people's list of priorities for a long time now. And doubts about whether man is causing it and about the whole theory of it have been rising. So this can only further that and only add to the sense that this is not a politically urgent matter and that perhaps it may all even be a fraud.
All right, Britt. Thanks.
All right, for a lot of these Democratic senators right now scrambling to pass a health care bill they say will reduce the deficit 10 years out, are these ClimateGate emails, ironically, proving it is nearly impossible to predict what's going to happen even a year out. Something Fox News contributor Michael Barone's warning about today in his latest op-ed. Michael, good to have you. I mean, I guess if we can't tell what the weather's going to be, maybe a year or so out, fiscal decisions are even tougher, right?
Well, that's right, Neil. I think I've just been looking over some of these emails that were hacked out of the climate research unit at the University of East Anglia. This is the repository, supposedly, of the data on which the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change based its recommendations, the basis for all this Copenhagen thing. And when you read these emails, these guys are talking about changing the peer review process, avoiding Freedom of Information Act requests, massaging the data in various, hide the decline. The fact is that there's been a lot of real dishonesty going on here, and it turns out, as reported in the Times of London, that they destroyed all the original data on which this supposed science is based.
So all this time, while those who question global warming, or at least man-made global warming, have been made to look like fools, idiots, and worse, along comes information that would seem to at least confirm these suspicions, and that's buried.
Well, that's right. It's this is the data on which these global warming hypotheses are based. It's the basis for these supposed computer models that these people have been telling us will predict with absolute certainty what's going to happen 50 years from now in the climate. And it turns out this is a case of garbage in, garbage out. The garbage in is the phony data that these people massaged, that they will not that they've destroyed the original data. This is not something that is replicable science that passes the ordinary test of science, and we're being asked to spend trillions of dollars over the next decades, imposing huge costs on our economy, and these people don't have the original data. This process, the IPCC process, I think is fatally damaged
but
by
they have argued,
these disclosures.
But they have argued, and you touched on it in your column, I think you used the analogy, you got to crack some eggs to make an omelet, so that maybe the ends justify the means of hiding things. And global warming is a problem, yeah, some of the data doesn't overwhelmingly support it, but by and large most of the data does, so let's sort of hide this. And that's going to be their justification. And that's going to be the justification of this Copenhagen meeting, that and the polar bear running out of ice and all that stuff. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's false science. Science is when scientists present their data, present hypotheses that explain it, and allow others to attempt to replicate those results and to examine the original data. The fact is that we have limited amounts of data on weather and climate over even the last 150 years, much farther out. Some of that data has got to be interpreted because the weather stations are located in places where the climatic variation comes in because of urbanization and so forth. But these people have destroyed the original data. They have been guilty themselves as convicted by these emails of massaging it in ways to try and make it come out their way. And I think what we're seeing here, Neil, is not so much an exercise in science, but an exercise in something akin to religious faith. Mankind has sinned, we must atone, we must go in sackcloth and ashes. And while religious faith is accepted by many people, we do so voluntarily in our society. We don't tax people and destroy the economy in order to maintain religious faith. These people are asking us to impose huge costs on society on the basis of science, which turns out to be a case of garbage in, garbage out.
Michael Barone, thank you very much.
Well, once again, there's another budding scandal that is completely invisible to the people who do not watch Fox News. This joins the parade of such scandals as Van Jones who? Acorn with hookers what? And now the terribly titled ClimateGate huh? Noel Shepard at Newsbusters found that after this thing started breaking late last week, there has been a total, out of all these networks, all of the stories combined from ABC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, and NBC. ABC had to cover the affair of Republican Senator John Ensign, which I guess some people were talking about in July. But the scandal we're talking about, all of these combined, all of these networks, zero. Zero. Nobody's reporting on this story. CBS also had a breaking story about a 10-year-old pianist playing Carnegie Hall, and good for her or him. And NBC featured not one but two stories on the release of Susan Boyle's new CD. Oh, I can barely contain my excitement. But in case you missed it, because you were anywhere but here, a hacker or whistleblower released thousands of emails and documents between some of the biggest players in the global warming non-debate debate. Give credit to the New York Times and the Washington Post for confirming the emails and that they are legitimate. Yesterday we showed you the messages between the scientists bragging about climate tricks used to hide the decline in temperatures. They were all freaking out. Oh no, it looks like our models are wrong. They were asking each other to delete messages to avoid Freedom of Information Act requests. That doesn't sound legal. Scientists are working together to try and change the definition of peer-reviewed journals so that anybody who said global warming wasn't real couldn't get their papers published. Wow. That almost sounds like the Dark Ages. Back in 2006, the media flocked to report on James Hansen. This is Al Gore's climate scientist of choice. Remember, he's the guy who said, "I'm being silenced by the evil Bush administration." Bush was apparently very good at silencing scientists as he was controlling spending, because Hansen did hundreds of interviews, hundreds of them. What was the proof of the silencing at the time? Well, he got some pressuring phone calls. That was enough for all of the networks. But not these thousands of emails. No. Shouldn't this be, everywhere now? The media couldn't get enough of every scandal that pops up from Lewinsky or Scooter Libby or, Mark Foley, Elliot Spitzer, apparently John Ensign. All of them are to varying degrees important, but how much could any of those actually cost you? This scandal will literally cost you trillions of dollars. That's what's at stake worldwide. It's on how we deal with the climate. And this scandal is so far invisible to everyone but Fox viewers. Think of it this way. Let's say you're an astronaut and you're getting ready to go out in space, and we're going to switch from the space shuttle to a glorified smart car to get into orbit. And everybody who's on the smart car team, they're like, no, the science is settled, this is perfectly safe. And you're like, well, wait a minute, I want to ask someone. No, don't ask any more questions. How do you react when you find out that there are engineers who are privately deleting files to avoid any kind of oversight, or that they're colluding to keep other engineers quiet that don't think there's going to be, enough oxygen for the trip, or that the data doesn't agree with their predetermined conclusions, so they assume the data just must be wrong? When it's your body burning up in the atmosphere, I bet you'd be interested. Well, your body's about to be burned up when trillions of dollars are at stake in the middle of a financial meltdown. Maybe we should look into this one, because it's getting hard to breathe in here. Why would we get into this smart car economy when it is now clear that many of the people who are forcing us inside are no longer to be considered honest brokers? Look what we've learned here. Well, look what you've learned by watching Fox. Highly questionable, possible illegal behavior from some of the top scientists who scream the loudest about global warming. And on the political and economical side, the president hires Van Jones, who has admitted that there was a radical kernel in the green economy, which was an engine, quote, for transforming the whole society, end quote. We know how corrupt politicians are. We're now learning how some of the biggest names in science are not that far behind. There are thousands of other emails and documents that echo these same sentiments and scandals in this batch. As we confirm them, I guess Fox, and possibly Fox alone, will bring them to you. I want to make it clear, there are a lot of good scientists out there working hard to do what's right every day. A lot of good scientists that actually believe in global warming. But even if you're a hardcore believer, when you look at these emails, shouldn't those scientists and all those hardcore believers say, wait a minute, let's clear this one up, because we're about to spend trillions of dollars, and it's based on the words of these people. I, for one, am not willing to risk our country and our world's economic future on an unsure solution to an increasingly unsure problem.
All right, the ClimateGate scandal exposed global warming as a myth cooked up by alarmists. Now a new book investigates just how they are and how communist corporations, elitist politicians, and reckless scientists have contributed to creating a phony crisis. Let's take a look.
The problem is global in scope and requires a global response. It also requires attention to obstacles in our political system, our market system, in the way we think about the crisis.
Within the last decade, with the help of poster boy Al Gore, the global warming movement has become an international concern. But in the wake of the ClimateGate scandal, many people are questioning the motives of the people pushing the global warming crisis and asking whether the world has been duped by a complex cover-up of something that does not exist. In his new book, ClimateGate, Brian Sussman asserts that the global warming hype is really just a form of communism rooted in the principles of Karl Marx. Now, Sussman argues that the communist tenets of moral relativism, the belief in science over God, and the idea of de-developing successful nations to fill the needs of underdeveloped countries all describe the global warming movement. ClimateGate, he argues, highlighted these principles by showing that the scientists were purposely hiding information that would prove their theories wrong and knowingly deceiving people by manipulating the science. The, quote, green movement has made billions for international corporations, governments, and elitist individuals. Prime example being jet-setting green hero Al Gore. Between his Oscar-winning film, best-selling books, comfy board positions on Google and Apple, and his investments in, quote, green company startups, some estimates are out there that Gore has made over $500 million off the global warming hype and stands to make much more. And let's not forget the current administration. President Obama has pushed hard for cap and tax and has the most aggressive green agenda to date. And joining me now is the author of ClimateGate, Brian Sussman, KSFO radio host. How are you? Good to see you.
Thank you, my friend.
All right, how much is Gore going to make off all this?
Al Gore stands to make perhaps $1 billion or more off of global warming. And listen, he doesn't believe in global warming. He doesn't believe in any of this. He believes in money. That's what this is all about.
How do you know that? How do you? I mean, I've got to believe that at least he believes the lie, even in spite of. You don't think so? You think this is? He knows it's a hoax.
1995, he was part of the President's Council on Sustainable Development. He put together something called the New Consensus. In the New Consensus, and this is a handbook used at legislative level all across the country in every state. In the New Consensus, he says, even when the science is uncertain, we need to go ahead with these plans. And we need to build, he said, build consensus. Sean, in my book, I clearly prove there is no consensus. This is a myth.
All right. How are scientists corrupted in this process? In other words, that they would manufacture, distort the data to advance their agenda. How did that happen? Why were they willing accomplices here?
Yes, because the temperature record of the Earth is clearly rigged. So you get Phil Jones at the CRU in the UK. I mean, he's pulled in $19 million for his organization in research grants. The temperature's got to be warming, Sean, otherwise he's not going to get the grants. You look at the money that James Hansen from NASA, who's in charge of the temperature over here, gets. This guy has raked in lots of money for his own self.
All right, we talk about Marxism, to each according to his need, from each according to his ability. This is sort of, you're making the case this is the redistributive model.
Yes.
But on a worldwide basis. So we take from rich countries like the United States and Europe and other countries, and we spread the wealth to all the developing countries, put all our resources, money, et cetera, in a collective pot. You think that's at the bottom of this?
I think that's at the bottom of this. Just think, Sean, with healthcare, if we would have had a book that showed us why Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid wanted to cram Obamacare down our throat, and what would happen once it was passed and instituted, I don't think that law would have passed. Here it is with ClimateGate. Read this book, and you will clearly see why they want to do this, and what we will lose if they get their way.
Why is the premise, is it predicated on the idea that capitalism is evil and we're raping and pillaging the planet for profit?
One of the founders of Earth Day is Paul Ehrlich, the Malthusian. His writing partner and buddy is John Holdren, Barack Obama's science and technology advisor.
This is the guy that supports compulsory sterilization.
And compulsory abortion. He believes that's constitutional. This is all, that's in my book. This is also a guy who wants to de-develop the United States of America. Take us down a notch, make us more like the rest of the world, take our wealth, transfer it. Sean, in this energy bill, there's actually
cap and tax.
Cap and tax. There's actually a mechanism in place whereby if you're 150% of the poverty level, you will get a check deposited in your account on a monthly basis, an unspecified amount of money in your checking account on a monthly basis. That's in the bill.
But go back to what you just said, that they want to take down America, or the president, hedged on the idea of American exceptionalism, said America's arrogant on his apology tour, and now is adopting the failed European socialist model. Right. So isn't that the net result of this? And then, so how does global warming fit into that?
This is a perfect plan whereby instead of using the us against them thing that Marx would use, now they found the environment as the hook. Everybody wants clean air. Everybody wants clean water. Now they're touting global warming and CO2, something you can't touch, taste, or smell, or even see, as the bad guy here.
But the bottom line is global warming is hype.
It's hype.
Global warming doesn't exist.
And it's a way to knock this country down many, many notches, Sean, de-develop the United States, transfer our wealth to other countries, and in the process, squeeze us for our energy.
But you got to admit, they've been successful to a certain extent. They've almost brainwashed and indoctrinated a whole generation of kids. They've convinced them that this is happening.
Yep.
Has ClimateGate been the eye-opening moment, though, against their agenda?
As far as I'm concerned, it confirmed everything I always believed. The temperature record was rigged. As far as Al Gore goes, and all of this nonsense regarding Al Gore's movie and how it's doctrine and how it's gospel, I go through his movie scene by scene and break it down. This man, in my opinion, is a charlatan.
All right. Thanks, Brian Sussman. Appreciate you being with us.
My next guest wants to sue Al Gore for fraud. He hopes a legal challenge will settle the global warming debate once and for all. He's John Coleman, and he founded the Weather Channel. So, John, why do you want to sue Al Gore?
Well, the deal is this, Greg. We have tried and tried and tried to get a debate on global warming with scientists on the other side. Al Gore or any of the scientists behind him over at the UN IPCC, we'd love to have a debate with them, but they say, oh no, the debate is over.
Yeah.
Well, now there are 30,000 of us. We have 30,000 scientists, 9,000 PhDs, who have signed up to debunk global warming. And they still won't listen to us. You realize that Fox is the only cable network that'll put us on the air. CNN won't. That other thing, MSNBC, it won't. CBS, ABC, NBC, they scoff at us. We can't get on the air. If it weren't for the internet, you wouldn't even know I existed.
Yeah, no, that's true.
The whole deal is that somehow we have to be heard. So we figure maybe a court of law.
Now, let me ask you, do you think, why hasn't Al responded to you? Is he scared, or is he just pretending you don't exist?
Well, I think he regards us as just a little gnat. After all, he's a former vice president of the United States. He's got an Oscar. He's got a Grammy. He's got $100 million. He's got a Nobel Peace Prize. I'm going to scare him? I wish.
Now, you say in a lot of your writing that global warming is a scam. Why do you think that?
Well, if you study all the papers of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, if you study everything their scientists have done, it all boils down to a claim that carbon dioxide, CO2 in the atmosphere, put there by our burning of fossil fuels, is going to turn the climate of Earth into an oven, and we're all going to bake and die. Well, that's sheer nonsense. We have been burning fossil fuels for 100 years. And what have we done so far? We might have raised the temperature by 1/10 of 1 degree, maybe. CO2 is a natural compound in the atmosphere. It's not a pollutant.
No,
plants have to have it.
It's like water vapor.
Every time I breathe out, I create it. It is no big deal, and it's certainly not going to end the world.
No, if you believed what the global warming freaks are saying, it's something so evil, but it's no different than basic water vapor. I mean, it's just a substance that's out there. But I got to ask you, because there is so much science out there that's saying that this is purely hypothetical nonsense, why did it become such a widely held belief? Why is global warming so, I don't know, easily embraced by people in Hollywood, by people in the media?
Well, it's the most amazing part of the story, really. How did it become such this huge accepted scam? I mean, it started off with some environmentalists and some one-world politicians at the UN who had World Earth Day in 1970, and out of that they finally managed to create this IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change at the UN. They claimed, of course, that was had something to do with science. All it was an environmental advocacy group. Then Al Gore learned a little bit about CO2 in college. One course, learned a little, and all of a sudden he became an expert. So he becomes vice president. The UN starts foisting this thing on us, and the media, which loves a crisis, loves to tell us that the world is coming to an end, the media jumped aboard, and once the media was aboard, so you got the UN, you got Al Gore, you got the media, what are the politicians going to do? They follow.
What's interesting is almost with almost every issue, you're allowed some kind of debate or dissent. And this is worse, actually, worse than any kind of religion where you're not allowed to dissent. You can't say anything without being called an idiot or crazy.
It's become a religion. That's exactly what it's become, an environmentalist religion. And of course, green and environmentalism is a wonderful thing. I'm an environmentalist, but wait a minute. You're not going to turn me into an extremist, and you're not going to get me to tell a lie to try to accomplish an environmental goal. That's exactly what they're doing.
Speaking of goal, what does a hockey stick have to do with all this?
Well, this goes back to the start of it all. A professor at American University named Michael Mann created a graph of temperatures through millennium flatlining and then shooting up at the end, the shape of a hockey stick. And the UN panel said, "Ooh, love that!"
Yeah.
And they kind of made it their Bible, and it became the cornerstone of their whole campaign. Now it has been proved, without a shadow of a doubt, to be built on absolutely bad science. You can put any data into that formula, and it'll come out a hockey stick, no matter what.
It's April the 14th, 2014, and we're in the heart of springtime. And look at this, it's snowing. So much for the hoax of climate change and the lie of man-made global warming. Regardless of the weather, climate, or condition of the earth, both Democrat and socialist progressives, climate change hoaxers, will use it as a way to tax all Americans and control our everyday lives. According to the Daily Caller, we understand that the South Pole ice sheet is actually increasing, not decreasing. We're told by global warming extremists that America and the whole rest of the world are going to suffer from massive floods on the East Coast. And all of these ice sheets are melting in the South Pole, and all the poor little penguins are going to die, and all this horrendous scare tactics for all of us taxpayers to spend more money on big government proposals that make these socialist billionaires richer with green energy companies. And now we see the actual science data has come in, and we found out that the Antarctica ice sheet is actually growing, not decreasing, but expanding. But what's really amazing is that we've been told that at the western side of Antarctica that the ice sheet is melting and all of these icebergs are falling off. And the reality is that the reason why they're falling off is because there's an active volcano underneath the ice of Antarctica on the western side. However, on the eastern side, the glaciers are expanding. Therefore, we know that if there was no volcano on the western side of Antarctica, we know the ice sheets would be expanding just like on the eastern side of Antarctica. Face it, aren't you tired of being lied to, college students, by your Marxist and communist professors and celebrities who are so adamant about pushing Russia's energy agenda onto America, where we're the only ones focused on green energy, windmills, and solar power, while Russia expands, bringing instability throughout the Middle East and in Europe so they can control all the oil and all the gas so they can become the dominant energy supplier of the world. And then Russia would set the energy prices for America and Europe. However, your socialist Marxist professors in your liberal universities are more interested in pushing Russia's agenda and what's good for Russia than what's good for America. It's too bad that socialist billionaires have bought off your professors and so many talking heads in the liberal media and the mainstream news media. And they didn't want you to know there was an active volcano in the western part of Antarctica.
West Antarctic ice sheet collapse is underway. A number of studies published in the past year show that the melting of the West Antarctic ice sheet is likely unstoppable. The glacier will probably disappear in a matter of centuries, adding 13 feet of water to sea levels, according to NASA. Researchers at Washington University in St. Louis recorded 2 bursts of seismic activity at the same location beneath Antarctica's ice sheet, leading them to discover an active volcano that will speed the rate of ice mass loss in West Antarctica. Eruptions are unlikely to break through the surface of the ice, but volcanic activity would melt the sheet, generating large volumes of water that would speed the flow of overlaying ice draining into the Ross Ice Shelf. Another study shows that warmer water at the depths of the ocean forms caverns beneath the ice, wearing away ice grounded on the ocean floor. These studies conclude that Antarctic instability will significantly contribute to sea level rise in the decades to come.
Active volcano discovered underneath Antarctic ice sheet. Mount Sydney is the youngest volcano rising above the ice in West Antarctica's Executive Committee Range.
Earthquakes deep below West Antarctica reveal an active volcano hidden beneath the massive ice sheet, researchers said in a study published in the journal Nature Geoscience. The discovery finally confirms long-held suspicions of volcanic activity concealed by the vast West Antarctic ice sheet. Several volcanoes poke up along the Antarctic coast and its offshore islands, such as Mount Erebus, but this is the first time anyone has caught magma in action far from the coast. This is really the golden age of discovery of the Antarctic continent, said Richard Astor, a co-author of the study and a seismologist at Colorado State University. I think there's no question that there are more volcanic surprises beneath the ice.
So much for man-made global warming and climate change mythology. So this shows just how incompetent our mainstream media is in our science community as they continue to foster the lie of man-made global warming and climate change. They can change the terms around, but the reality is the hard data says that there is indeed a volcano underneath the western side of Antarctica, and they continually use this as an example of global warming. How can it be man-made global warming when there's a volcano at the bottom of it? You know, and so this shows you the stupidity and the idiocy of our science community, and they think we're stupid too, and they demand our tax dollars to fund these fake green energy companies that make their socialist billionaires more and more money, that pays for these big fat checks of the liberal professors and those in the science community because they're money grubbing liars. It's time for these talking heads in the media to get a life and start reporting the truth and stop manipulating the American people and stop feeding into Russia's propaganda and energy policies for America, because everything the liberal, socialist, progressive Democrat does is to foster and promote Russia's economic plan for America and not what's in the best interest for the American people. So they put out these lies and they compromise science. It really makes you wonder, what other theories should we be questioning in the science community?
In your written testimony, you said that the science behind climate change and its effect on minority communities, quote, should not be up for debate. I'm curious, is the Sierra Club, is this a frequent practice to declare areas of science not up for debate, not up for consideration of what the evidence and data show?
If you are relying on the evidence and data, you know, the science, the preponderance of the evidence are there.
But that's a different thing than saying we should not debate a question, that the Sierra Club has declared this scientific issue resolved and there should be no debate.
Based upon the preponderance of the evidence, the science is settled, but the thing is that anything is up for debate, Senator. We can debate anything.
Well, you know, I would note that even the phrase preponderance of the evidence, having been a practicing lawyer for many years, means 51%. That means 49, at least 51% is what the preponderance means. You know, I would ask, for example, if you want to end debate, you don't want to address the facts, how do you address the fact that in the last 18 years the satellite data show no demonstrable warming whatsoever?
Sir, I would rely upon the Union of Concerned Scientists, and I would rely upon the evidence, and again, from our own NOAA officials. The data are there.
Is it correct that the satellite data over the last 18 years demonstrate no significant warming?
No.
How is it incorrect?
Based upon our experts, it's been refuted long ago, and it's not up for scientific debate.
So you're familiar with the phrase "the pause"?
The answer is yes, and essentially we rest on our position.
And to what you said, you are familiar with the pause, so to what does the phrase "the pause" refer? I'm sorry, you said you were familiar with that term, so I asked to what does it refer?
Essentially, it's the slowing of global warming during the 40s, sir.
During the 40s? Is it not the term that global warming alarmists have used to explain the inconvenient truth, to use a phrase popularized by former Vice President Al Gore, that the satellite data over the last 18 years demonstrate no significant warming whatsoever? Global warming alarmists call that the pause because the computer models say there should be dramatic warming, and yet the actual satellites taking the measurement don't show any significant warming.
But, Senator, 97% of the scientists concur and agree that there is global warming and anthropogenic impact with regards to global.
The problem with that statistic that gets cited a lot is it's based on one bogus study. And indeed, your response, I would point that your response is quite striking. I asked about the science and the evidence, the actual data. We have satellites. They're measuring temperature. That should be relevant. And your answer was, pay no attention to your lying eyes and the numbers that the satellites show. Instead, listen to the scientists who are receiving massive grants who tell us, do not debate the science.
Sir, this is one of the national pastimes in America, and while we're debating what 97% of scientists have already settled, the 3% that we, as I say, have invested in with regards to the carbon industry, you know, our planet is cooking and heating up and warming. So this is one of the reasons why.
So hold on a second. It is the Sierra Club's position that right now the Earth is cooking up and heating and warming. Is that the Sierra Club's? I mean, I just want to quote you and understand.
I am saying I concur with 97% of the world's scientists with regards to global warming and the anthropogenic effects of mankind with regards to climate.
But sir, would you answer the question? Is it the Sierra Club's position, as you just testified, that the Earth is cooking up and heating and warming right now? Is that the Sierra Club's position?
Global temperatures are on the rise, sir.
And I assume the Sierra Club would issue a public retraction if confronted with the facts that the data are precisely as I described, that over the last 18 years, there has been no significant warming, and indeed, that is why global warming alarmists invented the term the pause to explain what they call the pause in global warming, because the data demonstrate what you just said, that the Earth is cooking and warming is not backed up by the data.
We are concurring with 97% of the scientists that absolutely say the opposite, sir.
So if the data are contrary to your testimony, would the Sierra Club issue a retraction?
Sir, we concur with the 97% scientific consensus with regards to global warming.
Aaron Mayer, the president of the Sierra Club, keeps falling back on this 97% consensus. In my book, called A Disgrace to the Profession, I take apart this 97% consensus. Page 295 about the so-called 97% consensus, which comes from a survey conducted by Margaret Zimmerman, MS. What's MS? Master of Science? She sent a 2-question online questionnaire to 10,257 Earth scientists, of whom 3,146 responded. Of those 3,146 Earth scientists who responded, around 50% do not buy into the global warming. So she instead selected 79 of the sample, 79, and asked them a further question, climate science experts, as she called them. And 2 gave the wrong answer, so they were knocked out. And so 75 now out of the remaining 77 made it through to the final round, of which 75 were in favour of the big global warming alarmism or whatever it was. And so she said there's a 97.4% consensus. 75 scientists are what this chump from the Sierra Club, President Aaron Mayer of the Sierra Club, when he's going on about the 97% consensus, that's what he means. 75 scientists who answered a 2-question online questionnaire from Margaret Zimmerman, a Master of Science student at the University of Illinois in 2008.
I'd like to repeat, certainly in a moment, but I'd like to repeat the question and get an answer. If the data are contrary to your testimony, would the Sierra Club issue a retraction?
We concur with 97% of the scientists that believe that the anthropogenic impacts of mankind with regards to global warming.
If you don't believe that global warming is man-made, those are issues that if you look at the polls, young people are completely have a different view of that. Are you out of step with most young voters, and how do you convince them given that?
Well, let me take one of the components of your question and address it directly, then let me address your broader question. You mentioned global warming. I'm a big believer that we should follow the science and follow the evidence. If you look at global warming alarmists, they don't like to look at the actual facts and the data. The satellite data demonstrate that there has been no significant warming whatsoever for 17 years. Now that's a real problem for the global warming alarmists, because all of the computer models on which this whole issue was based predicted significant warming, and yet the satellite data show it ain't happening.
But what if there is something to it? I mean, let's say, a lot of people say the science is clear. Most people say the science is clear. But let's say that it's not. Let's say it's not clear. Why not do everything we can to reduce our carbon footprint? Wouldn't that be good to have some humility about it and maybe think?
Okay, let's talk about having humility. I read this morning a Newsweek article from the 1970s. Talking about global cooling. And it said the science is clear, it is overwhelming, we are in a major cooling period, and it's going to cause enormous problems worldwide. And the solution for all the advocates in the 70s of global cooling was massive government control of the energy sector, of our economy, and aspects of our lives. Now, the data proved to be not backing up that theory, so then all the advocates of global cooling suddenly shifted to global warming. And they advocated it's warming, and the solution, interestingly enough, was the exact same solution, government control of the energy sector and every aspect of our lives. But then the data don't back that up. So if you notice, the term has shifted, and now suddenly it's climate change. And climate change, and again, the solution is government control of the energy sector and every aspect of our lives. And when someone keeps proposing the same solution regardless of the problem, you start to think maybe they just like government control of the energy sector
and every aspect of our lives. And I am the child of two mathematicians and scientists. I believe in following evidence and data. On the global warming alarmists, anyone who actually points to the evidence that disproves their apocalyptical claims, they don't engage in reasoned debate. What do? They scream, "You're a denier." They brand you a heretic. You know, it is today the global warming alarmists are the equivalent of the flat earthers. You know, it used to be, it is accepted scientific wisdom, the earth is flat, and this heretic named Galileo was branded a denier. And you know what? There are an awful lot of people making a whole lot of money. Al Gore has made millions of dollars off of global warming, and a lot of these scientists who are most vocal about it are receiving massive grants on this theory that the data are not backing up. And you ask, well, why shouldn't we do everything? You know, we shouldn't be causing millions of hardworking men and women to have their energy bills go through the roof. It causes real harm and suffering when people all across this country lose jobs because the federal government wants to take control of aspects of our lives. It causes real suffering when single moms who are trying to feed their kids see their energy bills skyrocket because politicians are imposing massive costs, and that's not something we should do lightly.